The blood on Helena Marshall's wedding dress had barely dried when the outlaws dragged her from the burning church in San Pedro, California. Her screams swallowed by the chaos of gunfire and smoke that hung thick in the September air of 1878. Ethan Wolfe had been standing at the altar just moments before, his hands reaching for his bride when the doors exploded inward and masked men stormed through with pistols drawn, their leader shouting orders as they grabbed Helena by the waist and hauled her backward while Ethan lunged forward only to catch a rifle butt across his temple that sent him crashing into the wooden pews. He heard her crying his name as consciousness flickered, saw her white dress disappearing through the shattered doorway, and then everything went dark except for the burning determination that ignited in his chest like a prairie fire. When Ethan came to, the church was in ruins around him. The minister lay dead near the altar. 3 wedding guests were wounded and bleeding, and the town doctor was already moving among them with his medical bag. Ethan's head throbbed where he had been struck, blood matting his dark hair, but he pushed himself upright despite the protests of those around him. His deputy badge caught the light filtering through the smoke, and he realized with bitter irony that he had worn it to his own wedding because Helena had pinned it to his vest that morning with a smile, saying she was marrying both the man and the lawman. They rode east, old Timothy Chen said from where he crouched near the window, his face pale. 6 of them, maybe 7, had her on a horse with one of them. They were heading for the territory line. Ethan stumbled outside into the harsh California sunlight. The street was chaos with people running and shouting, but his eyes found the dust cloud in the distance, already fading toward the horizon. His horse, a strong bay gelding named Ranger, was still tied where he had left him before the ceremony. Ethan untied the reins with shaking hands, his mind racing. The California-Arizona territory line was less than a day's hard ride east. If they crossed it, jurisdiction became complicated. If they kept going, they could disappear into the vast wilderness that stretched across 3 states and multiple territories. "You cannot ride like that," Martha Jennings said, the seamstress who had helped Helena make her dress. She was pressing a cloth to a cut above her own eye. "You are bleeding, Ethan. You need the doctor." "I need my wife," Ethan said, his voice raw. He swung into the saddle despite the dizziness that made the world tilt. "Tell Sheriff Morrison what happened. Tell him they are heading east and I am going after them." He did not wait for a response. Ranger surged forward at his urging, hooves pounding the packed dirt as they raced out of San Pedro. Ethan's mind was a storm of rage and fear. Helena had come to California 2 years ago with her father, a merchant who had set up a dry goods store in town. She had been 19 then, with honey-colored hair that caught the sunlight and green eyes that sparkled when she laughed. Ethan had been 24, already wearing a deputy's badge, already earning a reputation as a man who could track anything across any terrain. He had fallen for her the first time she smiled at him across the counter of her father's store, and she had fallen just as hard when he brought her wildflowers from the hills and told her stories about growing up on a ranch in Colorado. They had courted properly for a year and a half, with Sunday dinners at her father's house and evening walks through town. Helena's father had died 6 months ago from pneumonia, and Helena had inherited the store. She had asked Ethan to help her run it, but he told her he was a lawman first, that tracking and justice were in his blood. She had accepted that, had loved him for it even, and when he proposed 3 months ago, she had said yes without hesitation. They had planned a simple wedding at the church, just friends and neighbors, nothing fancy. She had been so happy that morning when he left her at her house to get ready, her face glowing with joy. Now she was gone, stolen by men whose faces Ethan had not even seen clearly through the masks and the smoke. But he would find them. He would track them through hell itself if necessary. The sun beat down mercilessly as Ethan pushed Ranger hard across the desert landscape. The tracks were easy to follow at first, 7 horses moving fast, their hoofprints deep in the sandy soil. Ethan's head pounded with every stride, but he ignored the pain, focusing instead on the trail. By nightfall, he had covered nearly 40 miles, and the tracks led him to the remains of a campfire near a dried-up creek bed. They had stopped here briefly, perhaps to water the horses from canteens. Ethan dismounted and examined the ground in the fading light. 7 sets of boots, different sizes. 1 set smaller, lighter. Helena's shoes, the delicate ones she had worn for the wedding. His throat tightened as he imagined her sitting here, terrified and alone among these men. He found something else too, a scrap of white fabric caught on a thorn bush, part of her dress. She was leaving him signs, trying to help him track her. The realization filled him with both hope and despair. She was smart, his Helena, always thinking. But what were these men doing to her? Why had they taken her? It made no sense. Helena had no enemies, no fortune to ransom. Her father's store was successful but modest. There was no reason for this, unless these men were simply evil, taking a bride for reasons too dark to contemplate. Ethan could not sleep, so he rode through the night with only moonlight to guide him. Ranger was tired but willing, trusting his rider's urgency. They crossed into Arizona territory as dawn broke over the eastern hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Ethan of Helena's favorite sunset. She loved watching the sun go down from the porch of her house, and Ethan had sat with her dozens of times, his arm around her shoulders, both of them quiet and content in each other's presence. The tracks led northeast now, toward rougher country. Mountains rose in the distance, and Ethan knew the terrain would become more challenging. He stopped at a small trading post near a Pima village around mid-morning, his first pause since leaving San Pedro. The trader, a grizzled man named Amos, took one look at Ethan's blood-stained shirt and drawn face and poured him coffee without asking. "You look like death riding a pale horse," Amos said. "What happened?" "They took my wife," Ethan said, the words strange and terrible in his mouth. "Yesterday from our wedding. 7 men. They are heading east. Have you seen them?" Amos's expression darkened. "Came through here early this morning. Rough-looking bunch, had a woman with them in a white dress. She looked scared but unharmed. They bought supplies and rode on." Asked about the trail to New Mexico territory. Relief and renewed fear warred in Ethan's chest. She was alive and unharmed, at least as of a few hours ago. "How far ahead are they?" 3, maybe 4 hours if you push hard, but your horse is tired, son. And you look like you are about to fall over." "I will rest when I have her back," Ethan said. He paid for supplies, jerky and hardtack and grain for Ranger, and was back in the saddle within 10 minutes. The trail was clear through this country, the 7 horses leaving obvious marks. Ethan let Ranger set a steady lope, conserving the gelding's strength while still making good time. His own body screamed for rest, but he pushed past the exhaustion. Every minute mattered. Every mile brought him closer to Helena. The trail led through a narrow canyon where red rock walls rose on either side, and Ethan's tracking instincts went on high alert. This was ambush country, perfect for an attack. But the gang had no reason to expect pursuit yet, no reason to think anyone had survived the church raid well enough to follow. They would be confident, maybe even relaxed. That would be their mistake. By late afternoon, Ethan spotted dust in the distance. His heart rate spiked. He dismounted and used his spyglass, a good one he had bought with his first deputy's wages. Through the lens, he could make out 7 riders moving at an easy pace. And there, on the horse second from the front, he saw white fabric and honey-colored hair. Helena. She was slumped forward slightly, exhausted or injured. He could not tell from this distance. Rage filled him, but he forced it down. Rage made men stupid, and he needed to be smart. He trailed them at a distance as the sun began its descent. They were heading for the New Mexico territory line, just as Amos had said. Ethan's jurisdiction ended at the Arizona border, technically, but he did not care about technicalities. They had taken his wife. He would follow them into every state and territory in the West if necessary, and no law or boundary would stop him. As darkness fell, the gang made camp in a sheltered spot among some boulders. Ethan watched from a ridge above, counting heads and studying the layout. 7 men, just as he had thought. They built a fire and posted 1 guard while the others ate. Helena was sitting apart from them, her hands tied in front of her. Even from this distance, Ethan could see she was trembling. He wanted nothing more than to rush down there, guns blazing, but 7 against 1 were bad odds, even for a man as skilled as he was. He needed a better plan. He studied the men through his spyglass. The leader seemed to be a tall man with a black beard, the one who did most of the talking. The others deferred to him. They were professional outlaws. Ethan could tell by the way they moved, the way they kept watch. This was not their first kidnapping, not their first crime, which meant they were wanted men, probably with prices on their heads. That might work in Ethan's favor if he could get word to other lawmen, but that would take time he did not have. The guard changed at midnight. Ethan had been watching for hours, cold and exhausted, but his focus never wavered. He could see Helena lying on a blanket near the fire, her white dress filthy now with dirt and travel. She had not eaten anything, he noticed. She just lay there, staring at the stars. Ethan wondered if she was thinking about him, wondering if he was alive, if he was coming for her. He wished he could send her a message somehow, let her know he was close, that he would never stop until she was safe. An idea formed as he watched the camp. Risky, maybe foolish, but it might work. He waited until the hour before dawn, when men were at their most tired and least alert. Then he moved silently down the ridge, using every bit of cover the landscape offered. He had learned tracking from his father, who had learned from a Ute scout, and he could move through rough country like a ghost when he needed to. He circled around to where the horses were picketed, downwind so they would not catch his scent and alert the camp. The guard was drowsing, his head nodding forward. Ethan slipped past him like a shadow and moved toward where Helena lay. Her eyes were closed, but Ethan could tell she was not really asleep, just pretending. He knelt beside her and put his hand gently over her mouth. Her eyes flew open, wide with terror, but then she saw his face in the starlight and tears spilled down her cheeks. He removed his hand and pressed his finger to his lips. She nodded, understanding. Working quickly, he cut the ropes on her wrists with his knife. But before they could move, a shout rang out. The guard had woken up and seen them. Ethan cursed and pulled Helena to her feet. "Run," he said, pushing her toward the horses. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets whining past in the darkness. Ethan fired back blindly as he ran, buying seconds. Helena reached the horses and grabbed the reins of the nearest one, swinging up with desperate strength. Ethan vaulted onto another horse, and they were galloping away into the pre-dawn darkness, the shouts of angry men and more gunfire following them. They rode hard for over an hour, until the sounds of pursuit faded behind them. Finally, Ethan pulled up in a small canyon and dismounted to check on Helena. She slid from her horse and collapsed into his arms, sobbing. Ethan held her tight, feeling her shake against him, and his own tears came then, tears of relief and rage and love. "I thought they killed you," Helena gasped between sobs. "I saw you fall. I thought you were dead." "I am hard to kill," Ethan said, his voice rough. "Are you hurt? Did they harm you?" "No," Helena said. "They tied my hands and made me ride, but they did not hurt me." "I do not understand why they took me, Ethan. They keep talking about someone named Garrett, someone who wants me. I do not know anyone named Garrett." Ethan's mind raced. Garrett. The name was vaguely familiar, but he could not place it. "We need to keep moving," he said. "They will be after us soon. We need to find a town, a marshal, somewhere safe." They rode on as the sun rose, Ethan leading them north and east. His head was still pounding from the blow he had taken, and exhaustion was making his vision blur, but he pushed on. Helena rode beside him, her ruined wedding dress flapping in the wind, her face pale but determined. She was strong, his Helena. She had not fallen apart, had not given up. She had left him signs to track and had been ready when he came for her. By noon, they reached a small settlement called Springwater on the edge of New Mexico territory. It was barely more than a few buildings clustered around a spring, but there was a general store and a man who claimed to be the local law, a constable named Dutch. Ethan explained the situation as briefly as he could while the constable's wife took Helena inside to clean up and find proper clothes. "Garrett," Dutch said, stroking his mustache. "That would be Malcolm Garrett, I would bet. Runs a gang out of southern Colorado. Mean son of a gun. He is wanted in 3 states for robbery, murder, you name it. But why would he want your wife?" "She said she does not know him," Ethan said. "There has to be some mistake, or mistaken identity," Dutch suggested. "Maybe they grabbed the wrong woman. Happens sometimes with these idiot outlaws. They get their wires crossed." That made a terrible kind of sense. Helena's father had been just a merchant, nothing that would connect him to an outlaw like Malcolm Garrett. But if they had grabbed the wrong woman, that meant they would not just give up and go away. They would keep coming until they realized their mistake, or until someone stopped them. Helena emerged from the store wearing a simple cotton dress the constable's wife had provided. Her hair was washed and braided, but her eyes were haunted. Ethan went to her and took her hands. "We need to keep moving," he said gently. "They will still be looking for you. We need to get to a bigger town, find a federal marshal. Dutch here says the gang is run by a man named Malcolm Garrett. Does that name mean anything to you?" Helena shook her head. "I have never heard of him." "Ethan, I am frightened. What if they catch us again?" "They will not," Ethan promised, though he knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. "I will protect you, I swear it." They bought supplies and fresh horses from Dutch, Ethan paying with what little money he had in his pockets from the wedding. They rode out within the hour, heading northeast toward Las Vegas, New Mexico, where Ethan knew there was a federal marshal's office. It was 2 days' hard ride through rough country, but it was their best chance. The first day passed without incident. They rode steadily, stopping only to rest the horses and eat. Helena was quiet, processing the trauma of the past 2 days, and Ethan stayed close, watching the horizon for any sign of pursuit. That night, they made a cold camp in a grove of cottonwoods near a stream. Ethan did not want to risk a fire that might give away their position. Helena sat on a blanket, her arms wrapped around herself. "I keep thinking about the church," she said quietly. "About how happy I was just before they came in. I was standing there looking at you, thinking about how lucky I was, and then everything just exploded." "Reverend Patterson is dead, is he not?" "Yes," Ethan said gently. He sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulders. "I am sorry you had to see that. I am sorry for all of this." "It is not your fault," Helena said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You came for me." You tracked me across the territory line. I knew you would. I left pieces of my dress hoping you would find them." "I found them," Ethan said. "You are smart, Helena. You kept your head. That saved you." "I was terrified," Helena admitted. "That man, the leader with the black beard, he kept saying we had to get to Colorado, that Garrett would be pleased. He kept looking at me strangely, like he was trying to figure something out. At one point he asked me if my name was Helen Morrison. I told him no, that I was Helena Marshall. He looked confused but said it did not matter, that Garrett would sort it out. Helen Morrison. The name clicked in Ethan's memory. "Helen Morrison is a banker's daughter from Denver," he said slowly. "Her father is one of the richest men in Colorado. There were wanted posters a few months back saying she had been kidnapped, but then rescued. Helena, I think they were trying to grab her again. They must have heard she was in California visiting someone and got confused, got you instead." "So this whole nightmare is a mistake," Helena said, her voice trembling between anger and tears. "They destroyed our wedding, killed people, dragged me across the territory, and it is all because they are too stupid to kidnap the right person." "Yes," Ethan said. "And when they figure it out, they will either let you go or kill you because you are a witness. Either way, we cannot let them catch us again." They held each other in the darkness, drawing comfort from physical closeness. Ethan did not sleep that night, keeping watch while Helena dozed fitfully against him. He thought about their wedding morning, how Helena had laughed when he fumbled with his tie, how she had fixed it for him with gentle hands. They should be in a hotel room in San Pedro right now, starting their married life together. Instead, they were fugitives running for their lives through the wilderness. Dawn came cold and gray. They rode on, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. Around midday, Ethan spotted dust behind them. His stomach clenched. They were being followed. He urged their horses into a gallop, but the pursuers were closing the distance. They had fresher mounts, probably having switched horses at some point. "There is a ranch ahead," Ethan said, pointing to buildings visible in the distance. "We can make a stand there, get help." They raced toward the ranch, and Ethan could see now that their pursuers were definitely the gang, 5 riders, some of the original 7. The ranch was a sprawling adobe structure with outbuildings and corrals. As Ethan and Helena thundered into the yard, a man stepped out onto the porch with a rifle. He was middle-aged, weathered, with sharp eyes that took in the situation immediately. "Trouble?" he asked. "Outlaws chasing us," Ethan said, dismounting and helping Helena down. "I am Deputy Ethan Wolfe from San Pedro, California. They kidnapped my wife. We need help." The rancher did not hesitate. "Get inside. Name is Edward Kincaid. This is my place." He shouted toward the barn, and 2 ranch hands came running. "We got outlaws coming. Get your rifles." The gang rode into the yard minutes later, pulling up short when they saw 4 armed men waiting on the porch. The leader, the man with the black beard, raised his hand. "We do not want trouble," he called out. "Just give us the woman and we will be on our way." "Not happening," Kincaid called back. "This is private property and you are trespassing. Turn around and ride out or we start shooting." The standoff lasted several long seconds. Ethan stood with his pistol drawn, his other arm around Helena, ready to push her behind him if shooting started. Finally, the black-bearded man cursed and wheeled his horse around. "This is not over," he shouted. The gang rode off, but Ethan knew it was not a retreat. They would regroup, wait for darkness, maybe try to sneak in. They were desperate now, probably realizing their mistake but too committed to back down. Kincaid invited them inside, and his wife, a kind woman named Mary, took Helena off to rest. Ethan explained the whole story to Kincaid over coffee. The rancher listened carefully, then nodded. "Garrett's gang," he said. They have been terrorizing this territory for 2 years. Marshals cannot seem to catch them. If they think they grabbed the wrong woman, they might just cut their losses and run, but they might also try to take her to Garrett anyway. Let him decide what to do. Either way, you folks are not safe until you get to Las Vegas and federal protection. We are still a day's ride out, Ethan said. Can you spare horses? Ours are exhausted. Better than that, Kincaid said. I will send my 2 best men with you as escorts. And I will send a rider ahead to Las Vegas to alert the marshal. That way they can send men to meet you halfway. Ethan felt relief wash over him. I cannot thank you enough. Thank me by keeping that brave woman of yours safe, Kincaid said. And by helping put Garrett's gang away for good when this is done. They left at dawn the next morning with the 2 ranch hands, tough men named Billy and Sam, who rode with rifles across their saddles and knew the country well. Helena was rested, her spirits somewhat restored, though Ethan could see the strain in her eyes. They had been married for 3 days now, though they had not even had a wedding night. Everything had been stolen from them by men whose names they barely knew. The ride to Las Vegas took them through some of the most beautiful country Ethan had ever seen. Red mesas and green valleys and mountains that rose purple against the sky. Under other circumstances, it would have been a pleasure. Helena commented on the beauty once or twice, trying to find some normalcy in the situation, and Ethan appreciated her effort. She was resilient, his wife. She refused to be broken by what had happened. They met the federal marshal's men around noon, 4 deputies led by a marshal named Terrence Holt. He was a seasoned lawman with gray in his beard and eyes that had seen too much violence. He listened to Ethan's story with a grim expression. We have been after Garrett for a long time, Holt said. He is slippery as a snake. If we can catch these men who took your wife, they might give us information we can use to finally bring him down. They attacked you in California, grabbed you in Arizona, pursued you through New Mexico. They have broken federal law multiple times over. This is absolutely my jurisdiction now. With the federal men escorting them, the rest of the journey to Las Vegas felt safer, though Ethan did not let his guard down. Helena rode beside him, and he found himself reaching over to touch her hand frequently, reassuring himself that she was real, that she was safe. She would squeeze his fingers back, and sometimes she would smile, a small smile but genuine. Las Vegas, New Mexico, was a bustling town built around the plaza, with substantial buildings and a real hotel. Marshal Holt took them to his office first, where Ethan gave a full statement, and Helena described the men who had kidnapped her in as much detail as she could remember. Then Holt arranged for them to stay at the hotel under guard while he organized a manhunt for the gang. Finally, after 4 days of hell, Ethan and Helena were alone together in a hotel room with a locked door and guards outside. Helena sat on the edge of the bed and began to cry, really cry, for the first time since Ethan had rescued her. He knelt in front of her and held her, letting her sob out all the fear and trauma. When she finally quieted, he wiped her tears with his thumbs. "We are safe now," he said. "Holt will catch them. This will be over." "I know," Helena whispered. "I am just so tired, Ethan. I am tired and angry and sad. Our wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and they destroyed it." "Then we will have another wedding," Ethan said. "When this is done, when they are caught and locked away, we will have another ceremony, a better one, whatever you want." Helena managed a smile through her tears. "I just want to marry you. That is all I wanted the first time. I do not care about a fancy wedding. I just want to be your wife." "You are my wife," Ethan said firmly. "We spoke our vows before God. The rest is just details." They spent the next 3 days in Las Vegas while Marshal Holt and his men hunted for the gang. Ethan wanted to ride with them, but Holt insisted he stay with Helena. "You are a witness, and so is she," Holt said. "I need you both alive to testify. Let my men do their job." It was frustrating to sit idle, but Ethan used the time to help Helena recover. They took meals together, walked through the town plaza with guards shadowing them, talked about their future. Helena wanted to reopen her father's store. Ethan was not sure if he wanted to continue as a deputy after all this, but he did not say that to her yet. He needed time to process what had happened, to figure out who he was now that his world had been turned upside down. On the fourth day, Marshal Holt returned with news. "We caught 3 of them trying to cross into Colorado," he said. "Had a shootout near Raton Pass. 2 are dead, 1 is wounded but talking. Says Garrett is in a stronghold near Trinidad, Colorado. Says they were supposed to bring Helen Morrison to him so he could ransom her back to her father. When they realized they had the wrong woman, Garrett told them to bring her anyway, that he could figure out some way to use her as leverage." "Leverage for what?" Ethan asked, anger rising in him. "Against you," Holt said. "Once they figured out you were a deputy, Garrett thought maybe he could use her to control you, force you to help them somehow. The man is a snake, Wolfe. He preys on people, uses them up and throws them away." "So what happens now?" Helena asked. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the undercurrent of fear. "Now we go after Garrett," Holt said. "And I want you 2 to stay here under protection until we bring him in. Could be a week, could be a month, but I promise you we will get him." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to ride north and help hunt down the man who had destroyed his wedding and terrorized his wife. But Helena put her hand on his arm. "Stay with me," she said quietly. "Please, I need you here." So he stayed. They spent the next 2 weeks in Las Vegas, living in the hotel, walking the streets, trying to find some semblance of normal life. The town was pleasant, full of merchants and families, and people were kind to them once word spread about what had happened. The hotel owner refused payment for their room. The cafe owner brought them free meals. It was touching, the way strangers reached out to help. One evening, as they sat on the hotel balcony watching the sunset, Helena said, "I think we should stay here." Ethan looked at her in surprise. "In Las Vegas? Why not?" Helena said. "We cannot go back to San Pedro, not after everything that happened there. Too many bad memories. This is a nice town, growing. There are opportunities here. We could start fresh." Ethan considered it. She was right that going back to San Pedro would be hard. The destroyed church, the grave of Reverend Patterson, the memories of that terrible day. "What would we do here?" he asked. "I could open a new store," Helena said. "Start over with what money I have left. You could continue as a lawman if you want, or do something else. Ranch maybe. I know you loved working on your father's ranch when you were young." "I did," Ethan admitted. He had not thought about ranching in years, but the idea was appealing. Honest work, building something with his own hands, being close to the land. "Let me think about it." 3 days later, Marshal Holt returned again, this time with news that made Ethan's blood sing with satisfaction. "We got him," Holt said. "Malcolm Garrett is in custody, along with the rest of his gang. Caught them in their stronghold near Trinidad. Garrett tried to shoot his way out and took a bullet in the leg. He will live to stand trial." The relief that washed over Ethan was profound. It was truly over. Helena cried again, but this time they were tears of joy and release. Holt explained that both Ethan and Helena would need to testify at the trial, which would be held in Denver in 2 months. "Federal court," he said. "Garrett is facing charges in multiple jurisdictions. This is going to be a big trial." "We will be there," Ethan promised. That night, for the first time since their wedding day, Ethan and Helena were truly alone without the shadow of danger hanging over them. They lay together in the hotel bed, holding each other close, and Helena said, Tell me something good. Tell me about the future." Ethan thought for a moment. "I think we should buy some land," he said. "Maybe north of town, in the valley. We could build a house, start a small ranch, horses maybe, or cattle. You could have your store in town and I could work the ranch. When we have children, they would have space to run and play." "Children," Helena said softly, placing his hand on her stomach. "I want that, Ethan. I want a family with you. I want the life we planned before everything went wrong." "We will have it," Ethan promised. "I swear to you, Helena, we will have the life we deserve." They made love that night for the first time as husband and wife, gentle and tender, healing some of the wounds the past weeks had inflicted. Afterward, Helena fell asleep in Ethan's arms, and he lay awake watching her breathe, thinking about how close he had come to losing her. He had tracked her through 3 states, across territory lines, through danger and exhaustion. And he would do it again in a heartbeat, because she was his heart, his future, everything that mattered. The next morning they met with a local land agent who showed them several properties. They found a beautiful piece of land 15 miles north of Las Vegas, 200 acres with a creek running through it and good grazing land. The price was fair, and Ethan used his savings combined with money from the sale of Helena's father's store in San Pedro to make a down payment. They would own it outright within 5 years if the ranch did well. They spent the next month planning their future while they waited for the trial. Ethan hired a local carpenter to design a house, a sturdy adobe structure with a wide porch and large windows to let in light. Helena drew sketches of how she wanted the rooms arranged, where the kitchen would be, where the nursery would go when they had children. They bought furniture from local craftsmen and ordered supplies for the ranch. It felt good to build something, to create rather than chase and fight. The trial in Denver was everything Marshal Holt had promised, a major federal case with newspapers covering every detail. Ethan and Helena testified about the kidnapping, and Ethan described tracking the gang across 3 states. Malcolm Garrett sat in the dock looking sullen and mean, his leg in a splint, glaring at everyone. The evidence against him and his gang was overwhelming. Besides the kidnapping, they were connected to a dozen robberies, 3 murders, and various other crimes across Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Garrett and his surviving gang members were found guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Garrett to hang and the others to long prison terms. As the verdicts were read, Ethan felt Helena's hand tighten in his. Justice had been done. The nightmare was truly over. After the trial, they spent a few days in Denver. Helen Morrison, the banker's daughter who had been the gang's original target, sought them out at their hotel. She was a pretty young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, and she looked at Helena with sympathy and understanding. "I am so sorry for what happened to you," Helen said. "If they had not been trying to get to me, you would never have been taken." "It is not your fault," Helena said firmly. "The fault lies with evil men, and they have paid for their crimes. You were a victim just as I was." They talked for a while, 2 women who had suffered at the hands of the same gang, finding comfort in shared experience. Helen's father, the banker, insisted on giving Ethan and Helena a reward for their role in bringing down Garrett's gang. Ethan tried to refuse, but the banker was insistent, and finally Ethan accepted. The money would help them build their ranch faster, give them a cushion for hard times. They returned to Las Vegas in early December 1878, just as winter was beginning to settle over New Mexico. Their house was not yet finished, but the frame was up and the walls were rising. They stayed in town at a small house they rented near the plaza, and every day they rode out to watch the progress on their ranch. Ethan hired 2 ranch hands, young men looking for steady work, and they began building corrals and a barn. Helena opened her store in March of 1879, a modest place on the plaza selling dry goods and supplies. She had a good head for business, and the store was successful from the start. Ethan split his time between the ranch and helping Helena with the store, and they fell into a comfortable rhythm. They made friends in town, became part of the community. People knew their story, knew what they had survived, and there was a respect that came with that. Their house was finished in April, just as spring was transforming the valley into a carpet of wildflowers. It was everything they had dreamed of, with thick adobe walls to keep it cool in summer and warm in winter, a fireplace big enough to heat the main room, a kitchen with a cast iron stove Helena loved. They moved in on a sunny Saturday, carrying their possessions from the rented house in town, and that night they christened every room with laughter and love. In June, Helena told Ethan she was pregnant. He was overjoyed, lifting her up and spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. They spent the summer preparing for the baby, Ethan building a cradle from oak wood and Helena sewing tiny clothes and blankets. The ranch was doing well, the small herd of cattle Ethan had purchased thriving on the good grazing land. They hired another hand to help with the work, so Ethan could spend more time with Helena as her pregnancy progressed. Their son was born in February of 1880, a healthy boy with a strong set of lungs and his father's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Ethan's father who had passed away years before. Ethan held his son for the first time and felt something shift inside him, a fierce, protective love that was different even from what he felt for Helena. This tiny person was his to protect, to teach, to love. He thought about the day Helena had been taken, about how he had tracked her across 3 states, and he knew he would do anything, go anywhere, face any danger to keep his family safe. Helena recovered quickly from the birth, and soon she was back at work in the store with Samuel in a cradle beside the counter. Customers loved seeing the baby, and Helena became known not just as a good merchant, but as a warm, kind woman who remembered everyone's names and always had a smile. Ethan's ranch grew steadily, and within 2 years they had a substantial herd and were selling beef to markets as far away as Denver. They had a second child in 1882, a daughter they named Grace. She had her mother's honey-colored hair and green eyes, and Ethan was smitten from the moment he saw her. Samuel, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. The house was full of noise and life, and Ethan found himself happier than he had ever imagined possible. One evening in the summer of 1883, Ethan and Helena sat on their porch watching the sunset while Samuel and Grace played in the yard under the watchful eye of their nanny, a young woman from town named Carla. Helena leaned against Ethan's shoulder, content and peaceful. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "About the wedding?" "Sometimes," Ethan admitted. "Mostly I think about what came after, about tracking you, about how terrified I was that I would lose you." "You did not lose me," Helena said. "You found me. You rode across 3 states and you found me. That is what I think about, how you never gave up, how you never stopped coming for me." "I would ride across 100 states for you," Ethan said. 1,000. You are my heart, Helena. You and these children, you are everything." She turned and kissed him, a soft kiss that tasted like the lemonade she had been drinking and like home. "We have a good life," she said. "We built something beautiful from something terrible." "We did," Ethan agreed. He looked out over their land, at the house they had built together, at the children playing, at the cattle grazing in the distance. 5 years ago, He had been standing at an altar waiting to marry this woman when violence had exploded into their lives. He had spent days tracking her through harsh country, driven by love and desperation. They had survived that nightmare and built this life, this peace, this joy. In the fall of 1883, they decided to host a celebration at their ranch, partly to mark the 5th anniversary of their wedding day, partly just to gather their friends and give thanks for all they had. They invited half the town, it seemed, and people came from miles around. There was food and music and dancing, and Ethan stood with Helena in the center of it all, their children laughing nearby, their friends surrounding them, and he felt complete. Marshall Holt came to the celebration, older now and planning to retire soon. He shook Ethan's hand and said, "You two are living proof that good can come from bad, that justice matters. I am proud to know you both." Edward Kincaid came too, the rancher who had sheltered them when they were running from the gang. He brought his wife Mary, and they spent the evening swapping stories about ranching and laughing about the old days. "I knew you two would make it," Kincaid said. "I saw how you looked at each other that day you showed up at my ranch. That kind of love does not quit." As the sun set and the party continued under lantern light, Ethan pulled Helena aside for a moment of privacy. They walked a short distance from the house, to a spot where they could see the whole valley spread out before them, beautiful and peaceful in the twilight. "I want to tell you something," Ethan said. "Something I have been thinking about for a long time. That day they took you, when I woke up in that ruined church and realized you were gone, I made a promise to myself. I promised that if I got you back, I would spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy. I would build you a life worth living. I would love you so completely that you would never doubt it, not for a single moment. I think about that promise every day, Helena. And I want you to know that I intend to keep it for as long as I draw breath." Helena was crying, but they were good tears. "You have already kept it," she said. "Every day with you is a gift, Ethan. You did not just track me across 3 states. You brought me home. You gave me a family, a life, a future. I love you more than I can put into words." They stood together in the twilight, holding each other as they had held each other in that dark canyon 5 years ago when they were running for their lives and clinging to hope. But this time there was no fear, no danger, only peace and love and the promise of all the tomorrows stretching out before them. Their 3rd child, another son they named Thomas, was born in 1885. By then, the ranch was one of the most successful in the region, and Helena's store had expanded to include a 2nd location. They had become pillars of the Las Vegas community, known for their generosity and their willingness to help others. When a family fell on hard times, Ethan and Helena were there with food and supplies. When the town needed a new schoolhouse, they were among the largest donors. They gave back because they remembered what it was like to need help, to be desperate and afraid. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Grace was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love of books that made Helena smile. Thomas was still a baby, but he was already showing signs of being the most adventurous of the 3, always trying to climb out of his crib and explore. The house was full of chaos and noise and love, and Ethan would not have changed a single thing. In 1887, Ethan received a letter from the federal marshal's office in Denver. Malcolm Garrett had been hanged 2 years earlier, the letter said, but there was a final chapter to the story. One of Garrett's gang members, the one who had testified against him, had kept a journal. That journal had just been found, and it contained details about dozens of crimes the gang had committed. The marshal's office wanted Ethan to know that because of his testimony and his role in bringing down the gang. Numerous cold cases had been solved, and families had received closure. The letter thanked him for his service and noted that he had been a key figure in dismantling one of the most dangerous criminal operations in the West. Ethan showed the letter to Helena, and she read it with tears in her eyes. "All that pain," she said. "All that horror we went through. At least it meant something, at least it helped other people." "It meant everything," Ethan said. "It brought us here, to this life, this family. I would not change it, Helena, not if it meant losing what we have now." "Neither would I," Helena admitted. "Is that strange? To be grateful for something so terrible?" "I do not think it is strange to be grateful for where you ended up," Ethan said. "We survived. We built something good. That is what matters." The years rolled by with the steady rhythm of ranch life and family. Samuel turned 10, then 12, then 14, growing tall and strong, learning to rope and ride and work the cattle. Grace developed into a beautiful young woman with her mother's business sense, and she began helping in the store after school. Thomas was the wild one, always getting into scrapes and adventures, keeping Ethan and Helena on their toes. They had a fourth child in 1889, another daughter named Elizabeth, and she completed their family. In 1893, 15 years after that terrible wedding day, Ethan and Helena sat on their porch on a warm summer evening. Their children were grown or growing, the ranch was prosperous, and they were both in their 40s now, with threads of gray in their hair and lines around their eyes from years of laughter and sun. They had built a good life together, a legacy of hard work and love. "Do you ever miss being a lawman?" Helena asked him. It was a question she had not asked in years. Ethan considered it. "Sometimes I miss the clarity of it," he said. "The sense of purpose. But then I look at what we have here and I realize this is my purpose now, raising our children. Running this ranch, loving you, that is enough for me, more than enough." "I am glad," Helena said, "because I need you here, not out there chasing outlaws across states." Ethan laughed. "I did that once," he said. "Once was enough, although I would do it again if I had to. If someone took you from me again, I would track them to the ends of the earth." "I know you would," Helena said. "That is why I love you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, they could hear Samuel calling to the cattle, Grace laughing at something Thomas had said, baby Elizabeth babbling in her crib inside the house. It was the sound of family, of home, of a life well lived. "We made it," Helena said softly. "Against all the odds, through all the horror, we made it." "We did," Ethan agreed. "And we will keep making it every day for the rest of our lives." The sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Ethan took Helena's hand, the same hand he had held on their wedding day, the same hand he had reached for in that dark canyon when they were running for their lives, the same hand he had held through births and losses and triumphs and quiet moments just like this one. He lifted it to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture he had made 1,000 times and would make 1,000 times more. "I love you," he said. Simple words, but they contained everything. All the fear and desperation of that terrible chase across 3 states. All the hope and determination that had driven him to find her. All the joy and peace they had built together in the years since. All the promises made and kept. All the dreams realized. All the tomorrows yet to come. "I love you too," Helena whispered. "Always and forever." The years continued to unfold with grace and purpose. Samuel eventually took over much of the ranch operations, proving himself a skilled cattleman with a good head for business. He married a local girl named Rebecca in 1898, and they built a house on the northern edge of the ranch property. Ethan and Helena became grandparents when Samuel and Rebecca had a son in 1899. a boy they named Ethan after his grandfather. Holding his grandson for the first time, Ethan felt the same fierce protective love he had felt when holding his own children, and he understood in that moment that love simply multiplied and expanded, never diminished. Grace married a lawyer from Santa Fe in 1900, a good man named Jonathan who respected her intelligence and supported her ambitions. They moved to Santa Fe but visited often, and Grace continued to manage the store in Las Vegas remotely, with Helena overseeing the daily operations. Thomas, true to his adventurous nature, joined the cavalry and served out west, sending letters home full of exciting stories that made Helena worry and Ethan smile with pride. Elizabeth, the youngest, showed talent as an artist and went to study in Denver when she turned 18. In 1903, 25 years after their wedding day, Ethan and Helena decided to host another celebration at the ranch. This time it was not just an anniversary party, but a gathering of their entire extended family, a chance to bring everyone together and count their blessings. Samuel and Rebecca came with their 3 children now. Grace arrived from Santa Fe with Jonathan and their 2 daughters. Thomas got leave from the cavalry and rode in looking sun-bronzed and happy. Elizabeth took the train from Denver, bringing paintings she had done of the ranch from memory. The house was full to bursting with children and grandchildren, with laughter and chaos and love. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, watching his family, and felt a profound sense of completion. This was what he had fought for when he tracked Helena across 3 states. Not just her, though she was the center of everything, but this, the family they would build, the legacy they would leave, the love that would ripple outward through generations. That evening, after the younger grandchildren had been put to bed, and the adults sat around the fireplace talking, Samuel asked Ethan to tell the story of the wedding day and the chase. It was a story the children had heard in bits and pieces over the years, but never the full version. Ethan looked at Helena, and she nodded. So he told it, starting with the moment the outlaws burst into the church and ending with their arrival in Las Vegas under federal protection. He did not spare the frightening parts or the uncertain moments. He told them about the fear he had felt, the determination, the absolute certainty that he would find her or die trying. When he finished, there was silence in the room. Then Samuel said, "That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard. You literally tracked Mom across 3 states because you loved her so much." "I did," Ethan said simply. "And I would do it again. Love is not just words or feelings. It is action. It is choosing someone every day, fighting for them when necessary, building with them when you can. Your mother and I, we chose each other that day at the altar, and we have chosen each other every day since." Helena was crying softly, and Grace went to sit beside her mother, putting an arm around her shoulders. "You two are an inspiration," Grace said. "You survived something terrible and built something beautiful. You taught us what real love looks like." Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, Ethan and Helena walked out onto the porch together. The night was cool and clear, stars brilliant overhead. They had done this countless times over 25 years, stood on this porch and looked out over their land, and it never got old. Each time felt like a gift, a moment of peace and gratitude. "Our family is beautiful," Helena said. "Our grandchildren are beautiful. We are so blessed, Ethan." "We are," Ethan agreed. "And it all started with you, with choosing you, with refusing to give up when they took you from me." "I remember being on that horse," Helena said, "exhausted and terrified, wondering if I would ever see you again. I remember thinking that if I died, at least I had known real love. At least I had those months with you. And then you appeared in that camp like an angel, and I knew everything would be all right. I knew you would save me." "We saved each other," Ethan said. You stayed strong, left me signs to follow. You were brave, Helena. You survived. We survived, Helena corrected. Together, and then we did more than survive. We thrived. We built this life. I am so proud of what we have accomplished. They stood together in the starlight, and Ethan thought about the young man he had been 25 years ago, standing at an altar waiting for his bride. He had been a deputy then, skilled at tracking and shooting, confident in his abilities. But he had not truly understood love, not the depth of it, the power of it. It had taken losing Helena and fighting to get her back to teach him what love really meant. And then it had taken 25 years of daily choosing, of building and compromising and supporting, to fully understand the dimensions of what they had created together. I want you to know something, Ethan said. In all these years, through everything we have been through, I have never once regretted marrying you, not for a single moment. You are the best decision I ever made. Helena turned to face him, her green eyes shining in the starlight. You are mine too, she said. My best decision. My greatest love, my partner in everything. I would live through that nightmare 100 times if it meant having this life with you. They kissed then, a long, sweet kiss that held 25 years of love and commitment and partnership. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. They went back inside hand in hand, through the house full of sleeping family members, to their bedroom where they had shared countless nights and would share countless more. The years continued their steady march forward. Ethan and Helena grew older gracefully, watching their children raise children of their own, watching the ranch prosper under Samuel's management, watching the store continue to thrive even as the town around it grew and changed. They took pride in every grandchild, attended every school play and graduation, provided wisdom when asked and space when needed. They had become the patriarch and matriarch of a large, loving family, and they wore that role with grace. In 1910, 32 years after that terrible wedding day, Ethan was diagnosed with a heart condition. The doctor told him to slow down, to rest more, to let younger men handle the physical work of the ranch. Ethan chafed at the restrictions but obeyed them for Helena's sake. He was 64 years old now, his hair white, his face weathered by decades in the sun, but his eyes still sharp and his mind still clear. Helena was 60, still beautiful to him, her hair silver now but her smile unchanged from the day he first saw her in her father's store. They spent more time together that year than they had in years, sitting on the porch, taking short walks around the property, talking about everything and nothing. Samuel ran the ranch with easy competence, and the grandchildren visited often. It was a peaceful time, a season of reflection and gratitude. Ethan thought often about the life they had built, about the young deputy who had ridden across 3 states, driven by love and desperation. That young man had grown into someone who understood that the greatest adventures were not the dramatic chases, but the quiet daily choice to love and be loved. One evening in November, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Helena said, "Do you remember what you said to me the night after our big celebration? 25 years ago, you said love was action, that it was choosing someone every day." "I remember," Ethan said. "I have been thinking about that," Helena said. "About how you chose me every single day, how you still choose me, even now when we are old and gray. That is the most romantic thing about our story, I think. Not the dramatic rescue, though that was certainly romantic, but the choice. The daily, constant choice to stay and love and build together. It has never felt like a sacrifice," Ethan said. "Choosing you has always been the easiest thing in the world." "For me too," Helena said. "You are still my cowboy, Ethan, the one who tracked me across 3 states. The one who refused to give up. the one who kept every promise he ever made to me. They sat together as darkness fell, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of partnership. Inside the house, they could hear Samuel and Rebecca getting dinner ready, could hear grandchildren laughing and playing. This was what love built, Ethan thought. Not just a relationship between two people, but a foundation for generations. A legacy of commitment and care that would ripple outward long after they were gone. Ethan lived for another 8 years, his heart condition managed but always present. He saw more grandchildren born, saw his children thrive, saw the ranch and the store continue to prosper. He and Helena celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1928, though they counted from the original date in 1878, not from any later ceremony. By then, they had a dozen grandchildren and several great-grandchildren, a sprawling family that gathered to honor them. At the anniversary celebration, Ethan gave a speech that became family legend. He stood with Helena beside him, both of them in their 80s now but still standing strong, still holding hands. He talked about love and commitment, about choosing someone even when it was hard, about fighting for what mattered. He talked about tracking Helena across 3 states, about building a life from ashes and terror. And he ended by saying, "The greatest journey of my life was not the ride across 3 states. It was the 50 years I walked beside this woman. That is the adventure I am most proud of. That is the legacy I hope we leave." Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1918, at the age of 72. He died in the house he had built, in the bed he had shared with Helena for nearly 40 years, surrounded by family. Helena held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she was grateful that they had been together until the end, that he had not suffered, that their last words to each other had been, "I love you." She lived for another 10 years, staying in the house on the ranch, watching her family continue to grow and thrive. Samuel ran the ranch until his own son was old enough to take over. Grace's children took over the store. Thomas retired from the cavalry and came home to help manage the family businesses. Elizabeth's paintings of the ranch hung in galleries across the West, preserving images of the land they had all loved. Helena passed away in 1928 at the age of 78, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her. Her last words were about Ethan, about how she would see him soon, about how their love had been the defining force of her life. She was buried beside him in the cemetery overlooking their ranch, under cottonwood trees that Ethan had planted when they first bought the land. On their shared headstone, the family had engraved a simple inscription. Helena and Ethan Wolfe. She was taken across the territory line. He tracked her through 3 states and found her. Together they built a legacy of love. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, and the story of Helena and Ethan became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It became a reminder that love was not just a feeling but a choice, an action, a commitment that required courage and determination. It was a story about refusing to give up, about fighting for what mattered, about building something beautiful from something terrible. Years later, when Samuel's grandchildren asked about their great-grandparents, Samuel would tell them the whole story. About the wedding day attack, about Ethan's desperate chase across 3 states, about how he found Helena and brought her to safety. But he always made sure to emphasize what came after, the 50 years of marriage, the family they built, the legacy they left. Because that was the real love story, not just the dramatic rescue but the daily choice to love and be loved across a lifetime. The ranch prospered into the 20th century and beyond, a testament to the foundation Helena and Ethan had built. The store in Las Vegas remained a family business for 3 generations, before eventually being sold. But the land, the house, the memories remained, preserved and cherished by descendants who understood that they were part of something larger than themselves, part of a love story that had started with terror and determination, and grown into something beautiful and lasting. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, family members swore they could feel the presence of Helena and Ethan, still together, still choosing each other, still watching over the family they had created. It was a comforting thought, that love that strong could transcend even death, that the bond forged in desperation and strengthened over 50 years of partnership could never truly be broken. They had been separated once, when outlaws took Helena across the territory line. But Ethan had tracked her through 3 states and found her, and after that, nothing had ever separated them again. Not distance, not danger, not even death itself. They were together forever, in the land they had loved and the family they had built, a testament to the power of love to overcome anything, to survive everything, to create beauty from ashes and hope from despair. Their story lived on, generation after generation, a reminder that real love was worth fighting for, worth building on, worth choosing every single day for a lifetime and beyond.